The people most likely to be manipulated are the ones most certain they never would be. That's not an accident. That's the design. I was one of those people. Are you someone who overthinks, who gives people the benefit of the doubt? Not because you're naive, but you appreciate people are complex and you don't want to be unfair. Are you the kind of person who, when something feels off, you can always find a reason for it? Who talks yourself out of a gut feeling before you've even finished having it? This video is for you. Here's what I need you to understand before I show you a single one of these signs. Every person alive is capable of any one of them. A bad day could look like sign 4. A moment of insecurity could look like sign 5. One sign does not make someone a manipulator, but all 7 at the same time, each one enabling the others, that is a system. Systems are built on purpose. The reason it's so hard to see from the inside is this. Most of the time you feel like you're on a good path. One good month doesn't make up for a bad week. But that's not how we keep score with the people that we love or care about. We remember the warmth. We tell ourselves that the hard moments were a phase or our fault or something we could fix if we tried harder, or even something that benefited. We see the best in people, and that instinct, that generous human instinct, is exactly what's used against you. I wasn't looking for something obvious. I wasn't looking for someone who was cold all the time or cruel all the time. I trusted completely, and that's exactly how it worked. Today I'm going to be talking about one relationship dynamic that was manipulative, so you can see it from the perspective of someone who actually has been through this. If you're watching because something feels wrong and you can't quite name it, or because you've recently left something and you're trying to make sense of what happened and maybe avoid it for the future, or maybe someone that you know is in a dynamic that doesn't feel healthy from the outside, stay for sign 7. I'm going to show you exactly how a completely legitimate question becomes an apology, and I'm going to give it a name. But first, you need to see the 6 signs that make it possible. Sign 1, they make you question your perception. I was told to ask questions. That was one of the rules. Challenge, don't just accept things at face value. So that's what I did. When I was training abroad with my spiritual teacher, I was learning a specific healing sequence. In my practice materials, there was a step I'd been taught was essential, but it wasn't in the sequence. When I practiced it in front of my teacher for the first time, I asked whether I should include it, and she told me, "What do you think?" and to carry on. But I couldn't carry on without an answer. I didn't want to lock the wrong thing into my muscle memory, so I asked again, and she screamed at me, "Who do you think you are? How dare you question this that has been channeled by the godly energies? It is as written." She kind of went a bit quieter, but was even worse by saying, "I'm so disappointed. I really thought we were going somewhere and you had to ruin it." And she sent me upstairs to think about what I'd done. In total, over this one situation, I sat there for 2 hours until she called me back down. I was reading the practice materials again and again, looking for something that I'd apparently missed, looking for evidence, not that I was right, but I was already looking for evidence that I was wrong. When I finally came back down, I told her what I'd done wrong. I made it up. I invented a version of my own failure just because I couldn't bear it any longer. That's the sign. You don't lose your grip on reality all at once. You hand it over piece by piece to someone you've decided already knows better than you. By the end, you're not even being gaslit anymore. You're doing it to yourself. This is called gaslighting, named after a 1944 film called Gaslight, where a husband dims the gaslights and convinces his wife that she's imagining it. Research published in the Journal of Family Violence found gaslighting present in over 85% of reported coercive control cases. You might hear it as, "That never happened. You're being too sensitive. I never said that." My advice would be start keeping a private record, not something that you're using to prove anything to them, but to anchor yourself in your own reality. You could have a time-stamped voice memo, notes in your phone. Your memory is not the problem. Sign 2. Urgency or fear is used to bypass your judgment. That fear I described, being sent upstairs, not knowing what I'd done, that was one incident. But the fear didn't only live in moments like that. It was the constant air. I was told I had limited time to make amends for the wrong choices that I'd made in previous lives. The door was closing. This was my only chance. And without obsessive daily dedication, I would suffer and make no spiritual progression in this lifetime. I was told I move at a snail's pace, that I was behind, that time was running out. If I ever left, the karma would come back worse. The unhappiness would be permanent. Health issues would worsen for the rest of my life. I was genuinely terrified. Not metaphorically, genuinely terrified. I also worried that maybe I'd lose my mind. When fear is that total, you don't make decisions, you comply. You can't weigh anything up because the fear has already decided for you. That's what this sign is. It's not some tight deadline, it's the deliberate removal of your capacity to think. The moment you can't reason, the moment you're just reacting to threat, you're not choosing anything, you're just surviving. Psychologist Robert Cialdini documented this as the scarcity heuristic, the same mechanism used in high-pressure sales and cult recruitment. When urgency is manufactured, the brain stops reasoning and starts reacting. Coercive control researchers specifically note this tactic is used to prevent people from seeking outside counsel. You might hear it as, "You need to decide now. If you're not ready for this, maybe you're not as committed as I thought." Other people would be grateful for this opportunity. Any situation that cannot survive 24 hours of reflection is not a safe situation. Real teachers, leaders, and partners will always give you space to think. Pressure is a red flag. It's not a test of your readiness. Sign 3. Your outside relationships and sources of information get quietly discredited. Before all of this, I used different practices, different tools. I was developing my gifts. All of that stopped. I was guided to only use this lineage, only these methods. And I dropped my own way of channeling for hers because hers was more accurate. Even when channeling my own spirit guide, she would check my answers against hers because she was the most reliable source available. So there was no source I could reach that wasn't ultimately subject to her authority. Everything outside was discredited. I couldn't share any of this with anyone. The same threat that kept me moving fast kept me silent. For example, my sister's hen do and wedding, I had to check how many hours I was allowed to spend celebrating with them and then disappear. People noticed. It was very isolating. I called it spiritual discipline. That's what this sign looks like. It's not someone telling you that your friends are bad. It's someone positioning themselves far above anyone else that you stop thinking to look anywhere else. Your world becomes very small and you don't always notice because from the inside it feels like devotion. Isolation is documented as the most predictive factor for coercive control, escalating into physical abuse. Police in England and Wales recorded over 45,000 offences of coercive or controlling behaviour in 2024, up from 17,000 in 2017. And that's not because it's becoming more common, it's because people are finally naming it. You might hear it as, they just don't understand the work you're doing. They're not energetically ready to hear it. Your old friends are keeping you stuck and you don't need anyone else if you have this. My advice is if someone's guidance requires you to shrink your world to receive it, that is not guidance. That is a cage being built around you slowly. Healthy relationships expand your life. They don't require you to hollow it out first. Sign 4. The rules keep changing, but the guilt stays constant. Remember the story I just told you? Asking a question during my healing practice. I'd always been told to ask questions by that teacher. That was the rule. Challenge things, don't just accept them at face value. But in that same conversation, the rule changed. Without warning, without explanation, and there was no way to win. If I hadn't asked, I'd have learnt the healing wrong. If I had asked, I'd apparently committed an act of disrespect. There was no version of that situation where I wasn't the one in the wrong. And the guilt stayed exactly where it was, pointed at me. That's this sign. The rules are not there to guide you, they keep changing when it's convenient. The only thing that stays constant is that somehow it's always your fault. This links to intermittent reinforcement, the same psychological mechanism that makes gambling addictive. When approval is unpredictable, people work harder and become more attached trying to earn it. The goalposts don't move by accident. You might hear it as, I thought you understood this by now. I'm disappointed in how you've handled this. You're just like the rest of them. You cannot succeed in a game where only one person knows the rules. If you're always feeling like you're failing, ask yourself, is this actually failure? Or is this what it feels like when someone keeps moving the finish line? Sign 5. You feel smaller over time, not more capable. My teacher would ask me, why don't you move faster? And I would have to guess different answers until I landed on the one that she was looking for. The answer, her answer, was because I don't really want to do it, because the negative within me is trying to stay alive by avoiding doing the things that my soul has chosen. And then there was this. I was told I would never be good enough to be a leader in this work, not pure enough. So when people outside this dynamic would ask me, you know, it sounds like what you're being asked to do is very complicated and doesn't always make a lot of sense. So why don't you just create your own healing circle? And I'd hear her voice come out my mouth like, who do I think I am to hold such spiritual importance? And I was taught that was humility. It was self-erasure. There was another line that I'd never forgotten. I thought you were special, but you're really just like everyone else. That sentence does two things at once. It tells you that you had status and that you lost it. And if you want it back, you know what it requires. That version is harder to shake because it feels like it comes from you. Research in the Journal of Interpersonal Violence found that emotional abuse produces psychological damage comparable in severity to physical abuse, including chronic anxiety, loss of self-esteem, and difficulty trusting your own judgment. Most people don't recognise the damage until they leave and begin to recover. You might hear it as, you need me more than you realise. You wouldn't know how to do this without my guidance. You're lucky I see potential in you. My advice is to measure growth by your expanding autonomy and not by your increasing dependence on another person. Any system that makes you need it more over time rather than less is not developing you, it's consuming you. Sign 6. Boundaries are treated as betrayal. When my teacher told me, what do you think? And to carry on, part of me just wanted to continue to avoid whatever consequences came next. But I needed the answer, and it wasn't to be difficult. It was because I didn't want to lock the wrong thing in my muscle memory. So I held my position and I asked again. That second time, which was completely practical and reasonable, was treated as one of the most disrespectful things I'd ever done. Who do you think you are? I hadn't crossed a line, I just simply held one. I needed something and I said so. And that was enough to make me the problem. That's what this sign is. It's not that you did something wrong, it's that you existed with enough self-respect to need something. And needing something was treated like a betrayal. A study published in the Journal of Social and Personal Relationships found that people who are highly invested in a relationship are significantly more likely to silence their own needs because they fear that asserting themselves will end it. The manipulation exploits the love itself. The more you care, the more exposed you are. You might hear it as, after everything I've done for you, you're questioning me. This tells me you're not really committed, or I thought you trusted me. A boundary is not a threat. It is information about what you need. Anyone who responds to your needs as though it is an attack is telling you something about who they are. And I've lost friends over this. I'm choosing to only talk about one dynamic in this video, but I can see this across all different kind of relationships in my life. So just to recap, sign 1, your own perception was used against you. Sign 2, fear was used to stop you thinking. Sign 3, every outside source of support got quietly removed. Sign 4, the rules kept changing, but the guilt stayed pointed at you. Sign 5, over time, you got smaller. And sign 6, needing something was treated as a betrayal. Every single one of those ended in the same place, you feeling like the problem. Not once by accident, each by design. That's what sign 7 is going to show you, the mechanism beneath it all. Sign 7, questioning them somehow reflects badly on you. I came into that room with a question about a meditation step within the healing sequence that I was doing. I left it having committed an act of spiritual arrogance. A practical question about whether to include a step became a challenge to the entire authority of the lineage and to the godly energies. And when I was finally called back downstairs and asked to account for what I had done, I didn't defend my question. I'd already forgotten my question was valid. I just needed to come up with something that would satisfy her and regain that sense that I was still special and that there was still hope for me. So I invented a wrongdoing. And there is another line from this relationship dynamic that I've never forgotten. And it was, how do you think I feel? I am giving you everything and you treat me like this. She screamed, she shamed, she punished, and then she was the one that got hurt. So watch what happened across both of these moments. First, the question gets denied, not answered, not even engaged with, just dismissed as though it was never legitimate. And then comes the attack, not on the argument, but on me for having it, for daring to even question it at all. And then the reversal. So I walked in as someone with a concern. I left as someone who caused harm. She became the wounded party and I became the problem. That's called DARVO, which is deny, attack, reverse victim, and offender. So you come in with a question and you leave as the crime. The most disorientating part is by the time it was over, I was the one prosecuting myself. DARVO was named by a psychologist called Jennifer Freyd in 1997. It is especially effective in spiritual and therapeutic contexts where authority figures use language like your ego is resisting or you're not ready for this to reframe any challenges as your own failure. It uses your self-awareness against you. You might hear it as your ego is just resisting this. The fact you're questioning this shows you're not ready. I'm hurt you'd even think this about me. A question is not a weapon. If you're asking a genuine question and it results in you apologizing, something is wrong. Not with the question, with the dynamic. Those are the 7 signs. If any of them felt familiar, I just want you to know that noticing is not nothing. That is the beginning of everything. Manipulation works because it mimics care. The difference is this. Real care wants you to grow outward. Manipulation needs you to stay small. And the fact that you're here, that you've watched this, that some part of you maybe recognize something, that matters. Trust that part. If you want to go deeper into the neuroscience of why these dynamics are so hard to see and why your nervous system made it almost impossible to leave, and why this happens to the most intelligent and self-aware people. I have a separate video on that. You don't need it to trust how you felt when you were watching this. You already know what you know. Thank you for watching. Please like, comment your experiences if you feel courageous enough to do so, and subscribe for more.